Hi all, it's February the 14th and it's Thursday again, Valentine's Day no less. Love to you all. This is the Truth, Honour and Integrity Show. My name's Thomas Williams. Enjoy the show.
Ours was the first revolution in the history of mankind that truly reversed the course of government, and with three little words: we the people. We the people tell the government what to do. It doesn't tell us. We the people are the driver. The government is the car, and we decide where it should go and by what route and how fast. Almost all the world's constitutions are documents in which governments tell the people what their privileges are. Our Constitution is a document in which we the people tell the government what it is allowed to do. We the people are free. This belief has been the underlying basis for everything I've tried to do these past 8 years. But back in the 1960s, when I began, it seemed to me that we'd begun reversing the order of things, that through more and more rules and regulations and confiscatory taxes, the government was taking more of our money, more of our options, and more of our freedom. I went into politics in part to put up my hand and say, stop. I was a citizen politician, and it seemed the right thing for a citizen to do. I think we have stopped a lot of what needed stopping, and I hope we have once again reminded people that man is not free unless government is limited. There's a clear cause and effect here that is as neat and predictable as a law of physics. As government expands, liberty contracts.
Hi all and welcome to another week of the Truth, Honour and Integrity Show. My name's Thomas Williams. We've got the usual tonight, a bit of everything. News and views around the world, plus some Q&A depending on time schedule. A load of intel, some of it you can take to the bank, but perhaps not withdraw it. Counteracting bullshittery in alt media. History revision time again. We'll have a piece on history, or his story, and some more dot connecting and a wake-up piece near the end. So that's all coming up in tonight's show, and happy Valentine's Day to all. And let's get into the details. If you want to listen live, it's every Thursday at 7:30 p.m. Eastern Standard Time on Spreaker.com/user/8955881. You can also listen live on our website called thinkdifferent.thepeoplesclub.org. It's got all the archives on there. There's self-empowerment articles, there's grounding, centering and shielding documents, which are very useful currently. And we have the must listen to section. So if you're new to THI, if you go to the must listen to section and listen to all the videos in there, there's about 11. You will get up to date with what THI is all about, and we also have a special section on the Kim shows and Manor World Holding Trust. We have the YouTube Tommy Williams channel with all the archives. They're generally posted about 24 to 48 hours after the show. We have the Facebook page Truth, Honour and Integrity, and the Facebook social media alternative on MeWe.com. If you can't find us there, send an email in, and the email is for questions for the show or comments on the show, and occasionally some complaints, which we will address later. And that email is truth.honour.and.integrity@gmail.com. We have the People's Club Foundation website at thepeoplesclub.org. Send all proposals for funding to there. Do not send them anywhere else. And I'll have to mention on the proposal shortly. And thanks to all who have donated or wish to donate to my Patreon. It's patreon.com/TommyW/memberships. Right, where are we? let's get into something I need to cover before I get into the news. Following several issues, people using both mine and, more importantly, Kim's time, I'm requesting that people to not ask questions on projects or funding or when the funding is due. Now, it's just become very time consuming, and I ask you all who are interested in doing projects to prepare them all in private and keep hold of them. You can send them to the website, thepeoplesclub.org, but don't expect returns or to answer questions on them. That will all be done after the funding is released. Now, Kim's time in particular is taken up far too much by project leaders requesting information on several things that is consuming far too much of hers and our time, when our focus would be better on securing the funding first. Then we can deal with the projects and the various fundings required going forward. So please, no more requests for details on proposals or funding or help with it, and I thank you all for your consideration. Right, let's get into some news. And the first one is from Alaska, and this is a common theme. Snake oil people cornering the market, backed by various rogue elements, and forcing people out of their homes, and also forcing people to not be able to afford them or the rent. Now, in Elmendorf, Richardson Military Base in Anchorage, Alaska, there's a 7-block mobile home park, which is named the Four Seasons. And rentals start at $1,300 per month for a mobile home, really. And it's at least one of 40 multifamily properties in the area, or about 12% of the city's entire rental market, and it's all owned by Widener Investment Services Inc. I don't know whether that's related to Jay Widener of Alt Media fame, or Infamy, depending on which way you look at that guy. And the real estate agents in Alaska are saying this is like the £800 gorilla in the town. And 4,000 apartments are a fraction of the more than 38,000 units that the company owns in Seattle, Phoenix, Colorado, Texas, Canada's Alberta and Saskatchewan provinces and other markets. And together the properties have a net value of $2.3 billion. Now, this makes the company's 72-year-old founder, W. Dean Widener, a billionaire. Greg Sabana, as a spokesman for the Widener Apartment Homes, declined to comment. And a partner, Andrew Kinstler, a partner at law firm Helsel Fetterman in Seattle, said in a phone call that Widener didn't want to be featured in the article. And the gist of it is that they all suck up all the big properties that clients would like to buy, and usually in a private sale before he even hits the market. This is a common theme of skullduggery in local city councils. You have people there who pass bits of paper privately before it goes up to the public auction, and they swoop in and take all the best properties, and then no one's got any left. That's an example of greed, not need. Next three stories involves Israel, or the Zionists more in particular. And this first one involves Holland, or the Netherlands as it's now called. And Palestinians in Holland will for the first time be able to list the West Bank, Gaza and East Jerusalem as their place of birth. And this is in part because of a Dutch policy that Israel has no sovereignty over those areas. And the Dutch State Secretary Raymond Knops informed the House of Representatives in The Hague of the change on Friday, explaining the decision was based on the Dutch point of view that Israel has no sovereignty over these areas and the fact that Netherlands doesn't recognise Palestinian sovereignty either. Who made the Netherlands the adjudicator of that? Begs the question, but there you go. And natives of these areas who are living in the Netherlands currently have two options when specifying their birthplace at the Dutch Civil Registry as Israel or unknown. Now, the unknown option was only added in 2014 following protests seeking fairer options. And these options apply to Palestinians born after May 15th, 1948, when the State of Israel was created by the British. It never existed previously, in my opinion. Well, natives now resident in the Netherlands are still excluded from simply listing Palestine as their birthplace. They will now be able to use the name of the territory they were born in. Beyond ridiculous. So, as the Netherlands doesn't recognise Palestinian sovereignty, so the move is seen as a slightly positive step, people identifying from being there, while the UN and 136 countries do not recognise Palestine as a sovereign state. It's their country, really. And many EU countries are said to be waiting for this to be established as part of a peace agreement in the region. Really. Palestine has to be established as a nation. No, Israel has to be established as a sub-state of Palestine, not the other way around. Israel has announced it will be closing all UN schools, which is known as the United Nations Relief Work Agency schools in East Jerusalem, to replace them with Israeli-run schools in a blow to Palestinians again. The agency has complained it was not told of this decision, and Israel's National Security Council decided it will revoke permits for the schools which are run by the United Nations Relief Work Agency in East Jerusalem, and the agency which provides education, healthcare and social services for Palestinian refugees in East Jerusalem, Gaza and the West Bank, Jordan, Lebanon and Syria. And it runs 7 schools in Jerusalem which serve 3,000 students. Now, the report said the schools would come into the care of Israel's Jerusalem municipality that uses the curriculum set by the Israeli Education Ministry, and it's, according to the report, a rather disturbing idea for Palestinians and their wish for self-determination. Now, currently, East Jerusalem is occupied Palestinian territory which Israel annexed in 1967, and Israel views all of Jerusalem as its capital, while the Palestinians see East Jerusalem as capital of their future state. Now, the UN spokesman, Sami Meshasha, said the UN's existence in Jerusalem is not a gift from Israel, and explaining bilateral agreements bind Israel to respect the agency's installations, jurisdiction and immunity in Jerusalem. And in addition, Israel is a party to the 1946 Refugee Convention, and such attempts are in violation of this convention, he added. Yes, Israel has has had more violations of the UN Convention than the rest of the countries on this planet put together. And yet nobody wants to do anything. Final story from Israel. they're talking about an apartheid hospital, which is drawing condemnation for making Palestinians exit a bus to be searched before entering its grounds, with thousands of activists demanding an end to the discriminatory policy. The bus number 18 stops. That's interesting, isn't it? Bus number 18, AH. Oh my. Stops outside Barzillai Medical Centre in Ashkelon, and people suspected of being Palestinian must show their identification and get off the bus to go through a security check. The papers, please. It's all the same people that ran it, that's why. And the Association for Civil Rights in Israel and Physicians for Human Rights has documented several cases of discrimination and abuse. The Palestinian passengers who have no intention of entering the hospital but are simply taking the bus beyond that stop must disembark and wait to be picked up again when the bus leaves the grounds to continue on its route. And a video shared by Haaretz shows a security guard boarding the bus as a number of Palestinians get off before the vehicle drives through. This has to stop. There's a lot of people who are claiming anti-Semitism and all kinds of other people labelling Jewish people, but they have to stop. Their Zionist government operating these sorts of heinous civil rights abuses. It's their country, not yours. Next we go to America and Lockheed Martin. Contractors involved in a multi-billion decontamination effort at the notorious Hanford nuclear site have been accused of defrauding US taxpayers. No change there, is there? Now, this is according to a lawsuit against Mission Support Alliance and Lockheed Martin. MSA has a 10-year, $3.2 billion contract with the Department of Energy to support the decontamination effort at the decommissioned nuclear production complex known as the Hanford site. And the report said they were allowed to pick subcontractors, no surprise there either, for the nation's largest and most expensive environmental cleanup at its own discretion. No oversight. We'll hear more about no oversight later. And the MSA abused its authority and awarded improper favourable treatment for kickbacks, according to the Justice Department this week. Now, the lawsuit alleges that Lockheed Martin LMC and Lockheed Martin Services Inc. paid more than $1 million to executives of MSA, which was conveniently co-owned by another Lockheed subsidiary at the time. They're all interlinked. It's a bit like Citadel and NYPD and Vice. They're all interlinked. In order to secure a $232 million subcontract to provide management and technology support at the Washington State nuclear site from 2010 through 2016. Now, the Justice Department has alleged that the services were provided at inflated rates, and in some cases the Department of Energy was even billed twice. This is a common theme, a much common theme, by both MSA and Lockheed for the same work. In addition, the suit accuses Jorge Francisco Amico, who served as both the Vice President of LMC and the President of the MSA, of abusing his authority for financial gain by his simultaneously held posts. Unbelievable. Venezuela Amid the tightening noose of US sanctions, Venezuela's state oil company PDVSA is reportedly moving bank accounts of its joint ventures with foreign companies to Russia's Gazprom Bank. This was according to Reuters. For those of you who don't know, Reuters is run solely by the CIA and the rogue elements to boot. Customers of PDVSA joint ventures with US-based Chevron Corp, France's Total SA, and Norway's Equinor and other projects with foreign companies have reportedly been instructed to deposit their payments into Russia-based bank accounts following the latest crippling round of Washington sanctions, which was imposed on January the 28th. Now, a fresh round of sanctions are aimed at cutting off the government of Nicolas Maduro from oil proceeds. Really? Well, I never. After Washington recognized the self-proclaimed interim president Juan Guaido and claimed that Venezuela's state funds and profits should be controlled by the legitimate government, which actually it is, and not the puppet stooge Guaido. This has got nothing to do with Washington or Trump. I can tell you that right from the off. Nothing. You'll find out more why later. The state oil giant has been urging its foreign partners to make formal decisions on whether they want to bow to US pressure and bail out or preserve stakes in the joint projects and continue their business in Venezuela. Besides dozens of joint ventures with Western companies, PDVSA also has many projects with Russian companies and also Chinese investors who, according to some assessments, might lose the most from US economic pressure on the Latin American company. As for Gazprom Bank, they completely dismissed the Reuters story as inaccurate. Go figure. BRICS, we haven't heard from them for a while. The world's saviours, back in 2013, declared bollocks in 2014. But some don't listen, some like to carry on. But they are now considering an internal gold trading platform, which, if memory serves me correctly, and it generally does, they were doing this back in 2012 and 13. It's now 2019, so now they're reconsidering it. And when this happens, the global economy will be significantly reshaped, which they said they were going to do back in 2012, and the West will lose dominance. This is according to a precious metal expert. Really. In 2016, 2,338 tonnes of physical gold were traded, which was 43% more than in 2015. And gold is moving from the west to the east. And we have put the BRICS initiative into a broader context. It's just part of a geopolitical tectonic shift which started decades ago. That part is correct. Whether it takes place is debatable. And they report we've seen a constant outflow of physical gold from the west to the east, yes, done by the bloodline families and the psychopaths. And at the same time, the West has lost the economic war. And as a consequence, the focus now turns to the financial system. China dominates the world economy and has displaced the US as the world's most formidable economic powerhouse. And the creation of a new gold standard by BRICS is also a step to end the US dollar's domination of the global economy, as Beijing and Moscow understand that America used the dollar to control the world. Now, America didn't use the dollar to control the world, the clowns did. The financial structure and centre of the world is not in America, it's actually in England, or on English soil, even though the City of London is not part of England, technically, or part of London. They wish to implement a new type of gold standard 2.0, and they want to distance themselves from this control. Furthermore, the vast majority of people in Asia sees gold as superior or real money, which is something the West have forgotten because of all the paper wealth credit they have accumulated, according to Mr. Grass, who was speaking to RT. And the expert notes that the BRICS countries account for 40% of the world's population and around 23% of the world's domestic product. This is just a rehash. It's like loop news. You know, we were going on a new gold standard. I remember it in Cosmic Voice. That's 3 years ago now. And they were going to do this and they were going to do that. And they were going to save all the world. Except the key is in that narrative. Everything was shifting from the West to the East. The Federal Reserve, the UN, you name it. The main financial stock exchanges going from London and the Federal Reserve in America to the Federal Reserve in Beijing. All part of the 1912 ruling. 100 years for the West, 100 years for the East. That's no longer happening. I can assure you of that, because they have far less than they realise. Mouth on legs, New York Democrat Socialist Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez is calling now for all Latino people to be exempt from immigration laws because they are native to the United States. And the Congresswoman made the comments during a speech this week when she vowed to defund the US Immigration and Customs Enforcement, known as ICE, and declared she will push for Latinos to be exempt from immigration laws in the US because they descended from the indigenous people of North America. We are standing on native land, and Latino people are descendants of native people, and we cannot be told and criminalised simply for our identity and our status. The latest mouthpiece puppet. I should have put this next news item after the BRICS, really, because this is a sign of the panic now by certain Western globalists that they're going to miss out, and something has to change, because the East is not going to fulfill what they propose they're going to do, ever. And so now up pops some of the globalists warning countries to beware. Except this particular person is actually dead, George Soros. But an article written on his behalf this week has called on globalists and pro-European voters to wake up before the continent sleepwalks into oblivion. That was the globalist plan, remember? Ahead of the coming European elections, Soros, or whoever wrote that piece, explained in an article for a business website, MarketWatch, that the EU is facing a similar fate to that of the Soviet Union, and Europe is sleepwalking into oblivion, and the people of Europe need to wake up before it's too late. If they don't, the European Union will go the way of the Soviet Union, all by design. Neither our leaders nor ordinary citizens seem to understand that we are experiencing a revolutionary moment, that the range of possibilities is very broad, and that the eventual outcome is thus highly uncertain. Which is correct. Which is why the EU needs to stop giving money to NATO clowns to continue the destruction of the West. Or why certain leaders of the EU are allowing the globalist plan of flooding the country with migrants. That was deliberate, all of it. To basically crash the economy there, which was a deliberate policy of the globalists, as everything was going east. And B, to cause an increase in racism, and C, divide and conquer. D, the more hidden one, is to transfer undesirables into regions where they can cause false flags and other certain events. Canada next. Mr. Trudeau, what was it? Yep. Parliamentary Ethics Commissioner said on Monday that he would look into allegations that Prime Minister Justin Trudeau improperly pressured his former Attorney General to call off a criminal case involving a major engineering company based out of Montreal. Now, the announcement, made in a letter to two members of Parliament, followed several days of allegations in Canada that Mr. Trudeau or members of his staff improperly tried to force a settlement of charges that the company SNC Lavalin paid millions of dollars in bribes to officials in Libya, of all places. It's almost like America with Iran, is it not? When the country was ruled under Mr. Gaddafi. Now, the allegations of the push to drop the case first surfaced last week, and citing anonymous sources, the newspaper said that Mr. Trudeau's office had pressed Jody Wilson-Raybould when she was his Justice Minister and also Attorney General, in turn to pressure prosecutors to use a new law that would allow a remediation agreement with the company that would prevent a trial in exchange for paying a penalty. So in other words, they didn't want the people of Canada knowing that they're operating with the enemy, so to speak. Of course, Libya, oh, horrible country, all terrorists, we must bomb them into oblivion. A bit like Iraq and Kuwait and all the others, when the same people who are going along with that genocide program are doing backdoor deals. Subsequently this week, Mr. Trudeau's ambassador resigned, spelt F-I-R-E-D. US Federal Emergency Management Agency Emergency Management, Zero Management. Chief Brock Long has announced his resignation, also spelt F-I-R-E-D, and the latest senior name to leave the Donald Trump administration. He has been in post since June 2017, and according to this piece, he has led the response to several extreme natural disasters. They weren't natural, and they had no response, including the heavily criticised operation in Puerto Rico after that devastating hurricane, which they did nothing. Mr. Long was also involved in a row over the use of government resources, and in a statement he said, "It was time for me to go home to my family." That's fine for you, Mr. Long, but what about the families in Florida and Alabama and Georgia and North and South Carolina and also California, who are all still in tents 4 months later because you and your goons and Mnuchin at the Treasury are blocking it? Time for me to go home to my family. Time to go to jail, if you ask me. So Mr. Long, who has years of experience in emergency management, which is a misnomer in and of itself, added that this had been an opportunity of their lifetime, and that during his tenure the agency known as FEMA had worked in more than 220 declared disasters and delivered in none of them. Final news item: US prosecutors have accused a former US Air Force officer of spying for Iran. What about Obama? What about Hillary? No? Oh, okay. We'll just pick some unknown person out of the line and blame them. In what was an elaborate operation that targeted her fellow intelligence officers, Monica Witt, who allegedly defected to Iran in 2013, probably to set up the Muslim Brotherhood at the behest of Mr. Obama, has previously worked as a US counterintelligence officer. 4 Iranian citizens have also been charged with attempting to install spy software on computers belonging to Ms. Witt, and according to the FBI, Ms. Witt was last seen in Southwest Asia in July of 2013, just after Benghazi. Counterintelligence. Put 2 and 2 together. Right, let's see if we can get some of these questions out the way. I think somewhere along the line I'm going to have to do a Q&A show, because there's about 3 pages and so many have speculated that Ginsburg has moved on, and the Dems are keeping this a secret. Any truth to this rumour? I'm unaware that she's moved on as it stands. Who runs the Lucid Dreamer YouTube channel? Someone that is known to me now, following Mnuchin and others playing games with that channel, trying to disrupt it. And everything that goes on there is endorsed every week by me. So if you... Essentially, someone was saying the information comes across very fragmented, and the channel itself is not where I'd like to refer my people to. Well, some people don't have the patience to listen to 3 hours of shows. And so Lucid Dreamer is providing a good service, both to THI and to people who are interested in learning the truth, where they break it up into sections, and people can click on and listen to a 5 or 10 minute section of the show rather than 3 hours. So I think it's a good service, and I endorse it. Back to the 41 questions that I started about a month ago. There were studies done with groups focusing on decreasing the crime rates of specific areas, and then seeing that it actually did occur. This is to do with mass meditation again. Yes, it has been proven to work, but my warnings are, you have to be certain of who is within the group and who sets the intentions. That's the issue. It has been said that nothing in the world can overcome a completely non-resistant person. Nikolai Levashov speaks to the dangers of resistance in his short article on PSI. What you focus upon grows, whether it's wanted or unwanted. Absolutely. You know, we covered that pretty much in last week's show. Now, if this is a truth and hints at the power and potential of the human species, then I believe we have an immediate and viable tool to use now. Yeah, not just now, but you have had a viable tool all your life. But you only choose to engage it until now. Why wait? We've said it all along. The biggest fear the cabal have is the people rising up, standing in their own sovereignty, looking after each other. That's what we have to do. Next part, your grounding and shielding technique is an example. As you often say, we have an innate and extremely powerful technology within our very being that we can individually and collectively use now for all of humanity's benefit. We could collectively focus on disbursement of funds, for example. My question back is, why is the funds the first thought? You know, it's important, but not that important in the overall scheme of things. If the first thought is money, then in my opinion, you're not on the right path. There's lots of things that can be done without money. Caring for someone, sharing with someone, compassion. None of that costs money. Looking after each other doesn't cost any money. It's like people wishing each week that they win the lottery. What are you going to do with it? Buy fancy cars or fancy houses, whatever. How many will actually share it out? And therein lies the problem, is it not? Didn't I hear you say that you have had a major effect on potentially devastating weather systems? Well, it's not just me. People who believe they can do that have seen the evidence of being able to interfere with weather systems. So why don't we all use it, not just one or two? Perhaps people you work with in alt media, OIM, ground command control could join in on a mass focus events. It's possible, but I have warned of it recently. But this show and myself already does too much as it is, and adding more things to my list is not helpful at this moment. Next portion, perhaps at the very least you could take your listeners through the process and post it so we can use it on our own as a learning tool. Again, you're asking me to do things that somebody else can do. Have you considered whether I have the time, or whether I've already done it in the previous shows, which I have done? Right, we'll probably finish those lines of questions next week. Let's go and ask some of the other questions that people have sent in. Have you got any information or confirmation on Drake Bailey's claim that he took some purple shirt from the Pacer family, and also that he took out Marduk on his show a few weeks ago? My comment for that is, oh dear. Who is Satan and Baal? I know the Brotherhood of the Snake, Catholics and other religions worship Baal, and they have Satan and Baal gone with the jinns and the demons. I can confront the Freemasons who use demonic magic on me and stand a chance. Can I confront the Freemasons? That use demon magic on me and stand a chance now? Well, perhaps the person who asked this question, and there have been several questions like this on the same theme, and questions are generally based on the I and not the we, and it's common to many without realising they are doing it. But perhaps if you cut the cord of fear and of them attacking you, the issue will go away. Your energy and consent to it is facilitating the outcome they desire. It's all there to put you in fear mode. There are loads of people that are targeted, some way more than others, but some choose to not give it energy. Does it stop all the attacks? Not really, not in all cases anyway, but it does in some. But you control the energy or the state of mind that these type of events create. So do you continue to let it consume you, or do you cut the cord? Something to ponder on. In a past episode, you mentioned that this was not worthwhile. However, you phrased it to record documents and declarations. I was relieved to hear this, but this is because A, the disassembly of the factions is occurring and it's no longer necessary, or B, they don't adhere to it anyway, more likely to use it against the people. I think I was telling people to record documents or website links. I don't recall mention about documents and declarations. I think you perhaps got mixed up. I could be wrong, but that's the way I remember it anyway. It was to do with website links and documents that you may have saved. When you go back, you're finding that they're missing. So all the links that you're saving to go back to something are suddenly vanishing. So it was more to do with that. I appreciate some insight on the said ownership of souls, because you previously, as you are aware, many were merely trying to free themselves in the only way they could figure out lawfully. Our naivety in many aspects led to a lot of people losing their souls. They sold them out. That's not figuratively speaking, that's literal. While some may be unfortunate, well, a lot may be unfortunate, for those who literally sold themselves out for pieces of paper, those people really need to spend a lot more time on soul development, and perhaps need to start at the bottom again, in my opinion. If you were seeking employment at this time, what question would you ask during an interview to quickly assess the overall integrity of the organisation? What is their lowest paid staff member? Minimum pay is poverty pay. The Dutch governments are currently busy working on climate law, which is one of the many things that include a plan to cut the country off gas entirely by 2050 and fully independent on electric energy, which doesn't have to be a bad thing in and of itself. But their deal is to implement a so-called water pump system to heat the homes. And according to the person who wrote this question, it has not been proven as yet to be effective. Some parties attended the Bilderberg meetings are actually pushing for this water pump system, and the people in the Netherlands are very worried about this currently, as the costs for this pump is extremely high. My actual question that pops up is, what could be their actual agenda in forcing this BS on the Dutch people? Fairly simple. Russia controls most of the gas in the EU. So your country is being ran by NATO goons. Pure and simple. Where are we next? My question is about the troops in control of Rothschilds and Blackwater. How then can President Trump recall troops in the Middle East? Well, technically, Mr. Trump, although he now knows, the troops are American and belong to America. Of course, we know otherwise. That's the reality. So Trump throws out the message, and the others decide that's not happening. It's an example of Mr. Trump not being allowed to run the government at all. But there are certain circumstances where he can order the troops back. Maybe we'll see that in the near future. I'm curious about what happens to the Exchange Stabilisation Fund, which has been touted as the bank of last resort, where much of the stolen war gold have been accumulated. I don't think it is anymore. And as for the bank of last resort, we'll have more in the intel of that. The effort to completely turn the system down, banks and oil, is that just about the US or is it a global thing? Well, because of the dollar and the way everything is calculated and the fact that 86% of trade is done in dollars, if the US oil or banks go down, so does the rest of them globally. That's why the focus is here. Do the world leaders who know about the Manor World Holding Trust, most of them, if not all now, are aware of the Manor World Holding Trust, give any credence to what Anna von Ratz has to say? Not really, nobody knows her. Except her paymasters at Langley 2, the Nazis. A THI member told me that the memory wiping electromagnetic equipment, it's not electromagnetic, after death from now has been stopped a few years ago. That is correct. Can you please confirm and expand on this a bit as related to the breaking of the Mobius loop? That's being covered extensively in several shows. And it's also in the must listen to shows. You'll find it all there. What have you learned about language since the OYM show? Not a lot. Things has been too busy. You mentioned this planet has live living water. Are you referring to fresh water? No, I'm referring to all water. Despite certain entities adding salt to it. Is it possible to find another food source for the jinns, demons, so they can leave humans alone? Yes, they do have an alternative food source. I was notified this week of, following a meeting. But it's like going into a supermarket and buying a $3 or $4 bottle of wine compared to one that's about $20. They find us far more appealing. Work is underway to get them to stop that altogether. I'm having difficulty to understand how AI controls things or humans. You mentioned at one point in the Netflix series, The 100. Is that how AI is used? Is it a chip implant absolutely necessary? Well, it depends on the AI. You know, some of it just records. So, say the person who asked the question, AI decides to record you 24/7. Eventually, it's going to be a copy of you, is it not? And then it replicates. That's how it works. So it's essentially like an Alexa machine. It records everything you say and everything you do. And then should it be required to be played back, this is where the clones come in. This is where the channeling comes in, where you're hearing familiar voices, because the AI has mapped it, or did, the previous AI anyway. That's how it works. But the 100 series, essentially, a choice was made by humanity. They didn't want to go through pain, they didn't want to go through trauma, and they just wanted to party, drink and do drugs, and dance around and live in drama world. with no personal responsibility. In essence, they became zombies. Where are we next? Why was pulling this universe viewed as a better solution than Source Creator amending and repairing its creation? They thought it's based on people's own assessment. You know, we all have different opinions on many things. And the consensus was that something that was 87% dark across this universe was too big of a burden to carry and would take too much time to correct, and the danger was it would infect the other universes connected to the universal tree. So it's like when you get a plant and one branch is riddled. You know, sometimes you can cut that branch off, but other times you have to cut the whole tree down. If there is truly no hierarchy, and hierarchy is just a tool of the dark, then I don't feel this to be an unreasonable question. Is this universe kept running as an example of what rules not to set in place? No, some people or beings on both decided that it could be saved. And so far, despite many years, it's working. It seems as no. Are there still remnants of the electromagnetic equipment still around? I had a disturbing dream last week where a family member grabbed me and said it's time to go. I pulled away and said, no, I do not consent, and I immediately awoke. Well, you've done the right thing. There'll always be people pulling at your energy and trying to take you off your path. You decided you didn't consent and you pulled away. But unless you are able to fully cut off that cord or that connection, they'll always try and mess with your mind. That's the way it works. You know, the shielding does help clear a lot of it. Not all. Depends on how you set your shield and the intention around it. When was the world last in the 45-55 light to dark ratio? Very briefly, as the dark took over. It's my understanding that this universe in particular was created light only, and then the dark got in. Well, of course, if you don't know what dark is and you only create light only, it proliferates. It's a bit like termites in a tree. You won't see the damage until it's too late, because the surface damage is very minimal compared to the internal damage, and therein lied the problem. So at some point the dark took over, and then it ran away to 8713, which is why they were considering on pulling the whole universe. Do you have suggestions on what would help develop psychic abilities other than meditation, as in connecting to the internet, the universal energy? This is all about you developing on a soul level, where you can then access. If you're still operating in the astral, which is a sign, then the likelihood of those abilities being to the forefront are limited. Both on the mental planes, certain ones get certain abilities, and some get psychic, and some get telepathic, and some get telekinesis, and the ability to travel from point A to point B in 0 time by location. It just depends on the individual and your level of soul development. There's no actual learning book or tool as such to develop psychic abilities other than switching on your DNA, which is done by your own soul growth. I'll wait for time. Kim from the Man and World Holding Trust is 99% human DNA, the most pure form of humanity, as Tank explained. But what are we, the rest of the people on this planet? Are we vessels with a human soul, with specs like being multi-dimensional, with a precious co-creative blueprint? Souls are not human. Souls can be anything that the originator chooses. Soul can go into a dog in the next lifetime, or a tree, or whale, dolphin, even a reptilian. So souls are not just a property of humans. But there is a difference between this human vessel, as mentioned earlier, about the jinns and the life force, which is why they enjoy feeding off us so much, because of the whole package when combined is different to every other species in this universe. So everyone's unique in their own way. You can't make a comparison to Kim or anybody else. It's how you are and how you go about your life and your soul development. Turning it into a competition of who's got the most human DNA is not really helpful. The person who asked the question, what have you and 99%? Source human DNA. What are you doing with it? That's the key. If people are on the mental planes and are not exercising their abilities, what's the point of it? Can the salting of the world seas be undone? I'm told yes, it can. And will it be undone according to the peace treaty? It's not really part of the peace treaty. It's up to us to correct things once the technology that is available on many things can be released properly, and there's a will of a majority of the people to actually change things on this planet and not carry on being slave masters. I wish we could have a project, the system full reset, and stop this and start over for real with all the truths available. I don't think you really understand the term reset. It means all life is removed apart from plant life. It's not a case of just wipe the slate clean and just plonk us all back in and start over again. It doesn't work that way. Well, it was going to work that way, but the full reset of the planet would have meant we would not be coming back. And this species, line would end permanently as a failed experiment. This is what we're really, the bigger picture is what we're fighting for. Thomas, I've rarely seen the moon in the month of January. Is it purposely being hidden behind clouds for a reason? No. Was there any blowback from the elimination of M, or possibility of a future blowback from his family or friends? The family and friends are muted, in essence. They're controlled by the council of not interfering. So that is not a possibility, or not a full-on possibility, even though the Lord has been playing games again, and good friend of mine realigned him a bit recently. So, but the blowback from the elimination of M sent the cabal into a panic spiral, because he controls everything. Now, he's not in control, and they're not playing harvesters anymore, and Kim is. And they realise that they're in big trouble. So the blowback is theirs, not ours. As Kim was progressing along her career path, did she know deep down she was here for something greater and bigger that was yet to come? No idea. She had no idea. And then something kicked in around the age of 40 and everything changed. That's how it worked. Is there any plans to help people who need help? I think that's an example that we set last week of people writing stuff without thinking. This is what THI is all about. Every single show, every single minute is about helping people. And we all need help in one way or another. Maybe there was pieces missing to that question. I don't know. But THI is all about helping people. Is it wise for one to file exempt from federal deduction of their wages without being penalised now that the IRS and the Federal Reserve are not in operation? Well, they are in operation, but operating illegally. And I would never ever tell anyone not to pay taxes. You know, there's enough idiots in the alt media telling you to do this, that and the other, and people end up getting jailed. Just file your taxes. You can file an extension and see if something changes later on in the year, which may be helpful. But at this point, I'm telling everyone to file, whether that's filing for real or filing for an extension. Either way, until the full system is changed. Do you have anything on the origin of RH blood type? Rhesus negative is reptilian bloodline. What was President Trump talking about with there being a trade deficit with China? Did not the trust pay all our debts owed to China? Since it was said to have been done, hopefully this is an okay question. It was done. Like I said in December, you will not make sense of public statements here on in. And that is an example of that. Trump knows that that trade deficit and also the Federal Reserve has been paid off. But like the person asking me the question on the US debt clock, the clowns run all them, and they want to keep the illusion going that America does owe the Federal Reserve X, Y and Z when it actually owes jack. And maybe it's the other way around. Aren't the financial assassination mercenaries and the murdering, torturing mercenaries violating the peace treaty? No. It's human to human. The peace treaty is about the others, other species, violating humans, and vice versa. Human to human issues have to be dealt with ourselves and is not part of the peace treaty. Let me see. Same again. The 22 trillion debt owed by America to the Fed, and the 1.476 trillion debt to China was settled in full by the Man of World Holding Trust. Correct. China even sent these notes back confirming the debt is settled, which went to Kim and her trust. And should the US national debt clock be zeroed out? Yes. And eventually will when the clowns are removed. Do we trust Tank? His video posts make me feel weird. Well, go with your own instinct. You don't need me to confirm one way or the other. Why is my opinion on someone more important than yours? If you don't feel you can trust them, then you should go with your own instinct rather than mine. I think that's enough on the questions. Apologies to those I didn't get round to, including some from last week and none from this week. That put in, they all get put into the file for the show and will eventually be answered at a later date. So apologies for that, but we have that much to cover. That kind of takes precedence over Q&A and given some of those questions and answers or some of the questions, it's not really helping much, is it? Right, we'll have a song and then we're going to go into the intel. Hi all and welcome back. We're now going to go into the meaty piece of the show. The intel and the op-eds. The intel you're going to have to listen to closely, and I mean real closely. And we're in a dire situation financially, and people have to take the necessary steps to protect their own money. Too often people forget that banks don't have money. They only have our money. It's like the government. Government doesn't have any money. They have our money. And the more people realise that, the better. Here we go. It's all banks this week. Wells Fargo, for the past week and a bit, has been leveraging all their cash on hand to the Shanghai Exchange. Now, that money will not return like the last attempt, and they are currently running at negative 200% liquidity now. Negative, Wells Fargo. And this is why their shutdown and fake fire occurred. It's all a ruse to cover up major criminality and siphon the public's money off the Chinese elders, Rothschilds and Dragon groups. This is your money they are sending, remember. Now the Wells Fargo cash on ledger now is down to $27 million, which may seem a lot to many, but in reality that's pittance, and it's dwindling as of Tuesday. Citibank, next item, have done the same as Wells Fargo, only their liquidity is worse, near 500% negative liquidity. Citibank transferred its cash on hand to Citibank Hong Kong, and the Citibank Hong Kong tried to leverage the cash in RMBs, and the Chinese government blocked it. So for those of you who think America and China governments are in opposition, think again. What happened next is all that cash disappeared, just disappeared. Next item. There is various Central American and African countries tied directly to Citibank, it's almost like their Federal Reserve, who think their reserves are stored in this bank. But I'm sorry to tell you, they're all gone. All your reserves have been stolen and shifted to the east for financial leveraging of funds to keep the cabal in the game. Like I said, Wells Fargo and Citibank have sent their cash over to the Shanghai Exchange, and again it was promised it would be returned with some RV style program, like what happened the same when they sent money in last December. Those funds never returned then, and they will not be returning now. And further deposits in the west have been sieved out to the east, and what we've been telling you for the last 12-18 months is a financial assassination program against this country and the west. It's deliberate. And this is why there is no funds, or there's been limited access to these banks. Now it will spread to all other banks in quick time, as their desperation to stay in control is now at fever pitch. They are doomed either way, but I want to make that clear. The shifting of funds from one hand to the other only works for a short time, before the lower structure of it all begins to collapse. Several countries who hold foreign reserves of US dollars in both Wells Fargo and Citibank, word of warning to them, the issue is any nation that holds foreign reserves of US dollars in these banks now have zero left. It's all gone. All of it. That's what they transferred. Next item. Bank of America is at the point of bankruptcy and may be the first of many to fall. If they continue the current policy with the banks and the fun and games with Rothschilds, all banks will collapse in the very near future. Further updates of Wells Fargo of transferring all of its cash on hand last week to HSBC on the promise that the Chinese Li family bloodline was going to trade on it and send their money back with extra funds. What happened next is the HSBC servers went down and all the cash on hand was and still is lost. This is what the banks are doing with your money. Next item. Wells Fargo again is now having a hard time releasing any transfers in excess of $100,000, and Citibank is rumoured to be limiting any transfers over $25,000. So that's what's going on in the banking system. I can't warn you enough. The whole thing is in danger of collapsing very, very quickly. All their sources of extra revenue are being cut off, and all they're doing is moving the pot from one side of the world to the other. Eventually there's nothing left. And unless certain actions are taken and certain governments that have been given the tools to correct it do so quickly, the whole lot will crash. When it'll open again, who knows? It will bring pain to us all. Next item, a little bit lighter than that. Because of all what's been going on, the Trust this week hooked the system up to all 12 Federal Reserve banks, the Department of Treasury, and all the intelligence agencies, and then set the stage for more hammers. The Trust then informed the Federal Reserve that it owes the Trust $2.8 quadrillion. That's 2.8 followed by 15 zeros. The Trust then transferred $2.8 quadrillion of Federal Reserve debt to the Department of Treasury as the assignee to collect on the debt as they were past due. And it was transferred all over to the Department of Treasury, and the Federal Reserve were given 24 hours to pay, or the Treasury, who is the regulator over all private banks, has the right to foreclose on them all and also take all that they have, including the computer systems and all the buildings they are sitting in. So to recap, the Trust called in the $2.8 quadrillion of debt owed to the Trust by the Federal Reserve and transferred it to the Department of Treasury and gave them the right to take back all the banks owned by the Federal Reserve, aka Rothschilds, and have the right to foreclose on them and collect all their computer systems and the buildings they are sitting in. Now, the Trust requested that Mr. Mnuchin, who's the head man of the Treasury, to oversee the transfers and the safe delivery of the notes and also the assets. All back funds owed must be in by Friday. All banks are now in dire emergency of liquidity again. Many of the banks are not paying out on the higher sums of transfers, like I said earlier, or covering cheques or withdrawals. Many are not covering payrolls of companies that use third-party groups for delivering companies' payroll, and those payments are being delayed to give the illusion of having funds when in reality they have little. Now, this move now puts certain high-profile people right in the spotlight. How they react will be noted and recorded, and we will find out who is really on our side or not. It's line in the sand time. Next item. This morning, the Rothschilds told the Federal Reserve to ignore the Treasury, and when it became apparent that that was not possible, they called Mr. Mnuchin to assign all the bonds to them. So Kim then had to revoke Mr. Mnuchin's login and security clearances again. But whilst she was doing some checking, she found out that Mr. Mnuchin's security clearances was not issued by the US government, but by NATO in Belgium. Think about that. So when they tried to reissue Mr. Mnuchin's security clearances, Kim denied them for the first 10 times. Then they tried again, and Kim sent the message to, impolitely but correctly, for them to go away. So it appears Mr. Mnuchin was given very high clearances somewhere that was near Kim's level, and something he is not entitled to. Since then, the Trust and Kim have disabled the NATO systems altogether. A bit of background to the next piece is Kim, who has the authority to do so, had deleted Mr. Mnuchin's security clearance, his login to the US Treasury terminals, and also his access codes to the Treasury buildings previously, for blocking the trust funds, for blocking the release of the disaster relief funds for 105 billion, and for committing fraud twice directly in front of the president by producing fake gold certificates or misrepresenting gold certificates, saying they belong to Chinese elders, when Mr. Trump showed them they all belonged to the trust. But the Rothschilds, it appears, has given Mr. Mnuchin, who whilst is in a prominent government position, should not have a clearance level above the president, you would think, right? No, wrong. Rothschilds gave Mnuchin a clearance level of 62, which is 39 levels above the president, and almost the same level as Kim. Now, Kim is level 64, which is the highest on the planet, and no one can go higher than the guardian of the trust. No one. To put it into reference, the deep state, as it's called, is at the top end, is level 49. And that was known previously as the Majestic Group, until the SSP took them all out, killed them all around 12 to 18 months ago. But if you think this is a one-off and only applies to this incident, then you need to think again with this piece that was released today. The scope of the Hillary Clinton email investigation was so private, the OIG, Office of Inspector General, which is the Government Oversight Committee, didn't have the necessary security clearances needed to view the emails. And so subsequently the emails couldn't be given to Congress. And this is what I've been telling you all along. There is no oversight of the government or its myriad of contractors connected to it at all. All 3, 4 and 5 letter acronym groups in America have zero oversight. None. So the Office of Inspector General, which is the government's oversight, don't have necessary security clearances to view an investigation into emails. And this is just a small portion of the system they built that has to be worked out. And you would be amazed to find out how few are aware of this in or outside of the government. it needs to be broken down and either repurposed or deleted accordingly. But with so many snakes, with so many fingers in the pie, so to speak, that are allied to this or that faction, in bed with core pirates, or in bed with lobbyists, or in bed with the children's groups, allies are thin on the ground. And it kind of reminds me of the 100 series where Clark said, "Where are all the good guys?" And Bellamy's answer was, "There are none." And the thing is, this will take time. It runs through every single government department. And it is a monumental task when so many who stand there pumping their chest with fake tears running down their cheeks, professing their love for America, when in reality they are raping, pillaging, harvesting, killing, maiming and creating mass suffering for Americans. And many worldwide, due to what is essentially a relatively few psychopaths barking orders. So when people complain things are not moving quick enough, there's one of your answers why. These security clearances are beyond a joke and essentially awarded to people who play their game and has little to do with the work that they are being paid to do. Final intel item. In my opinion only, I want to make that clear, I'll repeat again for the hard of hearing. In my opinion only, Mr. Mnuchin needs to be declared an enemy of state and arrested now. Pronto. He is working against the interests of all American people. He's been fired twice, but the deep state network allows him to continue almost unhindered. Military people loyal to Trump or loyal to the country, it's time to do your duty and arrest this man now. The damage he and his ilk are doing will have grave consequences in the very near future for us all, unless more radical actions are taken. Not now, not 2 weeks or tomorrow, now. Our whole economy and all our banks are in danger of collapsing into oblivion. We're going to have a music break, which is probably an unknown song to many, but it kind of fits with the last piece. This is Rush and The Enemy Within. Hi all, and that was Rush, The Enemy Within. Yes, you Mnuchin and your bunch of reptilian goons. But it gives you and people who listen an insight of how much has to be changed. You know, when you've got the main government oversight committee who doesn't have the right security clearance to view an investigation, you know how deep it goes, and this is why it takes time. Like I did the piece, why no arrests? It's the same thing. You pull off the investigation, and the people who are supposed to investigate are either rogue, in most cases, or don't have the so-called security clearance. And the whole lot has to be stripped bare and start again. And slowly but surely, and unfortunately it is slowly, this is what's taken place, and it takes time, and there's a lot of snakes, Let's get into some op-eds. I can't promise it'll be lighter. It was one of them weeks, but the alt media hopium machine is now in full flow. We did warn of it, and it's all to provide distraction pieces and distraction agents also. But I can state categorically there is no military tribunals going on currently in Gitmo or anywhere else. period. It's just not happening. And no one has been selected from the alt media for these military tribunal roles either. As for the other, Soros has been arrested. Funny that, because he died in November of 17. Bush pleads guilty for 9/11. I doubt it. And Obama begs for his life. Well, he might do, because he's upset a lot of people. But the idea that these were all wrapped into one is more BS and has no basis of truth as it stands. I'm sorry it's not what you all want to hear, but this show will not be reporting fake rumours as facts. So whilst the Democrats are blocking the wall and throwing all kinds of extras into certain bills, and the latest is the Green New Deal, which is requiring unprecedented funding while simultaneously rejecting Donald Trump's request for increased border security funds, and details I found out this week of a loan. And this is why they're pushing the Green Deal. There was a loan granted to Nancy Pelosi's brother-in-law, has now emerged, that further highlights the Democrats' hypocritical use of taxpayer money, does it not? Now, this loan to Pelosi's husband's brother, Ron Pelosi, was $737 million back in 2011 from the Obama administration as a green energy loan, quote unquote. And this was to build a solar energy power plant in the Nevada desert, which has since failed. Now, the massive loan agreement was granted despite growing concerns at the time about the use of taxpayers' money, as vast sums were invested in technology similar to that of the doomed Solyndra energy project back then, and the $337 million handed to Ron Pelosi Crescent Dunes project in Tonopah, Nevada, was for a 110 megawatt desert solar power plant and was approved by Obama just days after the Solyndra project filed for bankruptcy. Just shift one fund to the other. Now, despite several warnings, the loan for the then minority leader Pelosi's brother-in-law company was granted, and the ground was broken on the plant's build back in 2011. Now, the issue is its average monthly production was expected to exceed 40,000 megawatts. As of recently, it only exceeded half of that value during the previous 8 months. And at the plant's current rate of energy production, it's unlikely that any of that loan will ever be paid back. That's why they're pushing the Green Deal, so that loan is rolled over. Nice people. And then the Dems threw this in for voting into the Senate. The framework will provide $1.375 billion for barriers along the border, including 55 miles of new fencing. Ooh. What is it, about 2,000 miles across? 55 miles? And here's the key part. With certain restrictions on the location. Why would he have certain restrictions on locations of where the border wall is going? That's sarcasm, by the way. It tells you there and then that they don't want the full wall, because they are making money on those coming across with various levels of criminality. Why would you stipulate there will be certain restrictions on the location of the wall. Now, apparently, and this is not confirmed yet, the 55 miles of new fencing will only be approved for 5 foot high. That's what the Democrats are proposing. Unbelievable. Next op-ed piece is about us and people who listen to THI or comment on THI. And it seems some people are struggling more and more over the last few months. I do notice it. And sometimes people, rather than go inward and address why someone's having is considered a problem, having a drink during a 3-hour talk show is a problem to them, or various other complaints of I'm laughing too much, or I play offensive songs, which was only played once, or adding some humour to the shows to lighten the mood is such a problem. But the question back is, why does it bother you so much? The issue really is not me, is it? But surely if it was, why would you listen to someone who irritates you that much? Why is laughter and fun so much of an issue to some people? Have we not swallowed that much in sin eating? It renders you unable to have some fun these days. Do you feel guilty for having fun, and if so, why? But in the world of political correctness, which is a misnomer in and of itself, it's neither political nor correct. And the whole thing becomes mired in stifling expression, rendering many mute, which leads to inner frustration and ultimately a vibrational lowering mechanism. This is what they've done. And much of political correctness, when it started, was to do with people not being nice to black people, which had to be addressed. Make no bones about that. But since when has the system ever been nice to anyone? Never mind blacks. But political correctness has morphed into something far more than being nicer to black people. It's a total control system. The classic being the N-word, which now disproportionately offends so many people of other colours, not because it's an offence to black people, no, because people like to be sanctimonious about everything, because in some way they become superior. But with the N-word, has now become ridiculous when black people are calling each other the N-word, and I'm told it's a term of endearment. Except term of endearment morphs into a racist statement if someone outside their colour says it. Where's the balance in that? So that one word, which is a derivative of Negro, and Negro means black, is now a banned expression that causes mock outrage, whilst the people who are offended by it now call each other by it. And yet people don't seem to think that whole scenario is bizarre, and even less see it as one giant divide and conquer tactic. It's no wonder we hardly have any comedians anymore. Oh, you can't laugh on the show, Thomas. It's because people are too concerned about being offended by anything that they've lost the use of laughter as a release mechanism tool. Is that not another control system that the system has created for us, and one far too many of us have bought into yet again? They can create it. It doesn't mean we have to go along with it. And this is how and why we end up in a mess. We played the game they created for us. They don't even have to administer it or tweak it for maximum effect. We do that all to ourselves. Like I warned last week, we have to think more on what we're saying, portraying, or writing. Now, one of the several complaints that I've recently received was the GIF of Dickhead Cheney. Yes, you heard that right. And a picture of him with a penis on his head. So it seems that's offensive to some, in particular Facebook, as they ban it. Fine, if it's offensive. But have you considered what I feel is offensive? Because what's offensive to me is people who don't focus on what Dick Cheney has done to this world, and why isn't that the focus? Why is defiling Cheney's face or forehead more of an issue than his participation in mass genocide, mass infanticide, ritual abuse and torture? That has to be the key issue, surely. Is it because you can't face that issue? Which is, in some cases, is understandable. But why target your inability to face real issues onto others and onto something that's rather trivial compared to what that man's done? These are the real issues we all must face, rather than the 4 to 5 people who wrote in complaining about the MeWe chat in the past week. This is not a critique of those who complained. Far from it. They are entitled to their opinion. But what I'm trying to get across to people and get people to see is, where is your energy going? Is it focused on the correct things? There's 3 hours of show material each week, and some complain about one song, me laughing too much, saying oops too much, me having a drink, non-alcoholic I might add, or clicking a lighter, and now the chat and the show is not serious enough. And the latest is I come across as arrogant because I point out that the cabal failed several times. Fine. What do you want me to do? Celebrate their mass genocide? Here's the intel for tonight, people. The cabal tortured, raped and killed loads of Africans this week. Hooray! They succeeded. And they are winning their Agenda 21 plan. Is that what you want me to do? Think about what you're actually saying. If you're running down some of the very few people who are at least trying to end the cabal, what does that say about you? Oh, I would love some of you to spend a week in Kim's shoes, never mind mine. Many wouldn't last a day, never mind a week. And it's all mindless thinking, and mindless thinking, or more importantly, heartless thinking. You're not thinking from the heart. And it's the very reason we are fighting this system at all, because each and every one of us has played the game for them in so many ways. You won't correct that with finding fault of everyone around you, whilst ignoring all the world's ills. We just won't. Now, the gist of this piece is, and why I have done it, is we have some people who will not focus on what has really triggered them within the show, and is masking that with a personal distraction of, look, someone over there is causing issues. Now that will work temporarily for that person, but not long term. The drama goes away, but the real issue stays with you. It is you that you are ultimately damaging, not the person that you are projecting at. And it's up to you all to look at yourselves and do your best to correct that trigger. I know it's not easy. but short-term pain brings long-term gain. The other way round never worked. And this is why our show focuses heavily on the shadow and inner work so much. Because if everyone fixed theirs, this world will become a better place overnight. But the issue is not me personally, or for large parts of the chat either. The issue is personal, unresolved aspects of yourself. That is the real issue. As the lead person of this group, I often become the projection screen, and I get that. But is projecting at me really helping you? The answer is no. Only when you address the real reasons for the projections will you then become the clean, clear and free of yourself and your own personal issues. You want to be free? Freeing yourself is cathartic. We're going to have a music break. Hi all and welcome back. We're going to be getting into history revision and dot connections shortly. But one of the questions I was asked probably about a month ago now is please discuss the subject of intent and does praying help? Well, intent is a funny word as we know little about implied intent, similar to implied consent also. When we are consenting either through word magic, ignorance or just plain stupidity by not thinking things through enough. So, you set your intent for a God or Jesus to save you, but what if that God or Jesus is being played in a role by somebody else? Can you state 100% that it's God or Jesus that you are speaking to? Well, the answer is no. You can only assume or desire that connection. You cannot 100% guarantee that it's that entity you are interacting with. So you set your intent of save me or save this. But if Source is listening and zillions of creatures and planets are crying for help, how can and is your case more important? This is what you've got to consider. And the question arises is, does your intent only serve your interests or requests, or does it involve people or incidents outside of your field? We are so wrapped up, almost tongue-tied with words and interpretations that setting your intent can become a minefield. Like last week, it was suggested that the foundation would not include Christians, and I answered that question based on how that narrative was delivered. Now, a reply email was that it didn't come out as they intended, and there is the problem. And this is why last week's show was highlighted our lack of thinking on what we say or write, because it has become a big problem. So when setting intent, it becomes a big issue, and is why I said avoid mass meditations, because those taking part in it do not know the real intent by those who are delivering it. They may say meditate on this mandala, but do we really know the intention of that mandala? Most of us don't. We just assume that it's from India or Tibet and it's all things love and light and peaceful. It's a wrong assumption. And we've just accepted that a narrative that is apportioned to it. Well, they'll say the Dalai Lama endorsed it, and he's from Tibet, so it must be okay. Except the Dalai Lama is Cabal. Oops. And this is where we have to be careful with intent. Many people will set their intent for the RV to happen, and they don't realise it will unleash the genocide program on us all. Many people set their intent for ETs to come down and save us, and that would unleash the harvesting program promoted by Ra and the Lord of One. And so I hope you can now see where the issues can and will arise with intent. We just don't know enough. This is the problem. As for praying, as it's done currently, it's throwing out your life force energy to an external vault. Just waiting to collect your energy. It's called Lushing. Why not pray internally? Pray to yourself to heal injuries or remove disease in your own vessel, or drive you to deal with your shadow and inner work. Pray for yourself to be a better person than you are currently. Surely that's a better use of your life force energy than sending it to some unproven being that sits on a cloud, that appears to predict cataclysms and yet does nothing to prevent them. That's your life force energy. So praying is inward, not external. That's Lucian. Again, we're naive on our life force energy. We're naive on our souls or our spirit, where it goes, what it does. These are things that have to be taught, and I'm hoping in the future we have extra shows planned with Randy Morgans and Alan from OYM, where we will be discussing several topics, teaching being probably the main one. And one of the proposals that was put forward is, should we consider a mystery school? Well, I think that will be important going forward. We need to find out more of who and what we really are. Then the subject of intent and praying will really come into focus of how naive we have really been. It was announced this week that the Democrat Elizabeth Warren is going to be running for the next election. She better start running now, because she'll waste her time. But I found it rather funny that the initials Democrat Elizabeth Warren spells Jew, as in directed energy weapon. Weapon being the right term for her, methinks. The people in the UK will get that more. Right, let's have some history review and rewriting. And then what will follow will be a dot connector of where it all fits in. Margaret Sanger and Planned Parenthood, which has all the ingredients of Nazism, eugenics, occultism and psychotic tendencies, with all the usual characters in place: Jack Parsons, Darwin, Hubbard, Steiner, Blavatsky, Crowley, the Ku Klux Klan, the Democrats, the Catholic Church and feminism, all rolled into one giant future alt-media investigation program that replaced the previously known conspiracy theorist program. Now, she was born in Ireland, an advocate for women's rights, but also a strong advocate for birth control, which was actually banned in America until her and others worked to overturn it in the late 20s or early 30s. Now, she was arrested at least 8 times for expressing her views during an era in which speaking publicly about contraception was deemed illegal. So much for the free speech and the Constitution back then in the 1920s. But this woman had serious backing from somewhere. As nowhere in her records show where her funds came from, and particularly in her early days for travelling globally. Now, she was based in New York, and she travelled to Holland to overview a birth control clinic back in 1915. That will have been a high cost. And then it became clearer later that funding became available to her and was followed by trips to China, Korea, and also Japan in the mid-1920s. Again, can you imagine the cost of that trip? Plus, she also set up a clinic, which was the first of its kind in 1923, and the clinic and the 3 trips to Asia were all heavily funded by the Rockefellers. There's your first dot connector. Now, riddled with contradictory thinking, which was something we covered in last week's show, as this statement shows, Sanger wrote that masturbation was dangerous. Really. She stated, "In my personal experience as a trained nurse while attending persons afflicted with various and often revolting diseases, no matter what their ailments, I have never found anyone so repulsive as the chronic masturbator."